going to talk this morning about the Bible story that you thought you knew, Luke chapter number 19. When I was in Sunday school, maybe some of you know this song. Zacchaeus was a wee little man. How many of you could sing that song together? Oh, look at all those hands. All right. I told my wife I wasn't sure how many people would know it, but what I find so funny is we sang Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and we have our fingers like 2 inches apart, as almost as if we're telling a story from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, as opposed to a real individual, right? And if you've ever read the story of Zacchaeus in a storybook, it goes a little bit like this: that Zacchaeus was a rich tax collector who stole money from his own people. Well, one day he heard this man Jesus was coming through town, but he was very short. So he climbed a tree so he could see over the crowd and look at Jesus. When Jesus got to the tree where Zacchaeus was, he looked up and he told him, "Zacchaeus, come down, because I'm going to go to your house today." The very wealthy people and the religious people complained about what Jesus was doing, but he did it anyway. And he went to Zacchaeus' house where his life was transformed. And he says, "Jesus, I'm going to give away half of my money and restore with interest all that I have ever stolen." That's the storybook of Zacchaeus. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but I think, man, there's a really important piece that gets left out of this story that I think might just change how we see this interaction between Jesus and this tax collector. So I want you to join me in Luke chapter 19. We're going to read through the first 10 verses together, the whole story, and then we're going to go back and work our way through the passage. Luke chapter 19, and verse number 1. It says, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." So let's look at the Bible story we thought we knew. Beginning in verse number 1, the story begins with Jesus just passing through. As if Jesus was not actually going to meet Zacchaeus. He was just passing through. But Jesus had time to stop for Zacchaeus. We've seen this multiple times in our journey through the Gospel of Mark, what we would consider divine interruptions, how the storm interrupted Jesus and his disciples as they were going to meet a demoniac with a legion of demons, how a woman with an issue of blood interrupted Jesus on his way to Jairus' house to heal his daughter. And it suddenly makes us stop and ask one more time, how many sacred encounters do we miss because we're just passing through? Meaning, are we looking for interactions that the Holy Spirit has prepared for us as we are going from point A to point B? Or are we only concerned with getting to point B? How many times has Jesus set up a divine interaction where one of his children gets to meet someone who doesn't know him, and yet his children are too busy, building our own kingdom, to stop and listen for the Spirit who wants us to help build his kingdom? May we be a people who listen, who slow down, and who obediently respond to the Spirit of God, even if we're just passing through. Verse 2 tells us that there was a man by the name of Zacchaeus, and he was this chief tax collector. And suddenly we're beginning to see some echoes through the scriptures that we have already walked through, such as important people approaching Jesus. We just read of Jairus, this synagogue ruler who approached Jesus. Now we read of a tax collector, the chief tax collector, approaching Jesus. Both men of prominence, but one is hated, one is honored. Yet they're both coming to Jesus. We see unclean people approaching Jesus. Tax collectors were considered unclean because they held the money of the Romans, and the Roman money had an inscription of Julius Caesar as an image of God, which is what was inscribed on their money. And because of that, tax collectors were considered permanently unclean. And we've just finished looking at a woman who was permanently unclean for 12 years. And so we again see unclean people, important people, and unclean people coming to Jesus. And here's something I think that is interesting to the story is Zacchaeus' name. It actually means righteous or pure. But according to the story that we're reading, it's counter to his reputation. Meaning his very name mocked him every time it was used. Hey, Zacchaeus. Hey, righteous one, living unclean. Hey, pure one, who's permanently unclean. So we see this interaction between important people, unclean people, and even this unclean tax collector, though. We've seen what Jesus has done with tax collectors, because earlier in Mark, we saw Jesus call Matthew a tax collector to follow him. And here's the thing, Matthew was likely present with Jesus as they were passing through Jericho. And I don't know this, but I wonder, could it have been that Zacchaeus knew Matthew? And Zacchaeus, could he have heard of the change in this former tax collector's life? And he wants to see the man who was impactful in Matthew's life. And I don't know the answer to that. That's just pure speculation. But here's what I do know, that we regularly as believers need to remind ourselves that how we live points other people to Jesus or can turn people from. I regularly immerse myself in the Jewish teachings, trying to understand the cultural context of Scripture to get it better. And here's what many people don't know about the Jews. They actually truly respect Jesus as a rabbi. They think his teachings are wise. They'll study what he says as a Jewish rabbi. We sometimes sit back as Christians and say, well, how could these Jews think that Jesus is a good teacher and not believe he is the Messiah? Because in the Jewish world, when a disciple chooses to follow a rabbi, he is not just trying to learn what the rabbi knows, he is trying to become who the rabbi is. And so for some people, the disconnect isn't the teachings of Jesus, it's actually the disciples of Jesus. They look at those who claim to be disciples of Jesus and say, how could this man be God's Messiah if his own followers don't even attempt to love God with all their heart, mind, soul, and strength? How could this man claim to be the Messiah of God when the people who truly follow him don't even look like him? They don't attempt to pursue holiness. They don't care for the vulnerable. They live lives for themselves where Jesus lived his life giving. If he is that weak of a rabbi, he could never be the Messiah. It is not the teachings of Jesus that turn the Jews away. It is the followers, the weak-hearted followers who look nothing like Jesus, which should challenge us deeply. Do our lives look like the one we claim to be following? Verse 3 says that Zacchaeus wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him since Jesus was coming that way. We often assume that Zacchaeus climbed the tree because of his height. But let's be honest for a moment. If you knew someone short, wanted to see, and you were in front of them, wouldn't it be just easy to let that short person in front of you and then you could still see over them? Which means it really likely wasn't Zacchaeus' height that took him to a tree, but rather his reputation. Because no one wanted this unclean tax collector near them. He was viewed as unclean, just like the unclean woman. However, she fought her way through the crowd because she was likely an unknown. He was a well-known tax collector. When people would have seen, would not have wanted him nearby, which means Zacchaeus now is left. The only way he could see Jesus is if he can find a solitary place to do so. And he climbs the sycamore fig tree, which then leaves this question. Was his choice to climb a tree only about seeing Jesus, or could it possibly have been also about hiding himself from the crowd who had rejected him? Sycamores, tells us, is a type of the fig tree, known for large leafy branches. Could it be that Zacchaeus climbed a tree so he could see Jesus, but so that Jesus and others couldn't see him? And as soon as we listen to the echo of hiding amongst the fig tree leaves, we're transported from Jericho all the way back to Eden, where Eve also tried to hide behind fig leaves so that they could see God, but so that God couldn't see them. But just in the same way that Adam and Eve could not hide from God, Zacchaeus could not hide from the Son of God, because verse 5 says, when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. Oh, and immediately we have this other echo. Jesus meets a tax collector, goes to his house, and is criticized by the religious. We've seen that when Jesus did the same thing at the beginning of his ministry with Matthew. Now Jesus is at the end of his ministry doing the same thing with Zacchaeus. And do we see how everything just stays the same? Jesus is still the same person, and then he's done all these miracles to reveal himself as the Messiah, and yet the religious people have stayed the same. They'll still complain about Jesus going to the house of sinners. And yet every time in the Gospels, Jesus enters a house, something miraculous happens. Peter's mother-in-law is healed. He's in a house where the roof is taken off and a paralyzed man walks out being healed. Matthew's heart is changed. Jairus' daughter in their house was raised from the dead. And now he's walking into Zacchaeus' house because Zacchaeus invited him, while a group of religious people say, we don't want you coming to our house, but we'll criticize you for going to other people's homes. Almost as if we don't need transformation, but we don't want you to transform them. And that just reminds us. I think we all need to kind of just sit back and realize some people in life aren't seeking to be shaped by Jesus. They're trying to reshape Jesus and others to look like them. Jesus, we reject them. You should reject them as well. As opposed to, oh, Jesus, if you could bring transformation to these sinners, please do so. We would love to see these sinners transformed. No, they don't want that. They want Jesus to treat those outsiders in the same way they do. Our call, church, our call is not to change the critics. We don't possess the power to change anyone or anything. Our call is not to change the critics. Our call is to follow Jesus and let Jesus change us. And if we were more concerned about whether Jesus is changing us than the changes other people need, I think we would live out his life a whole lot more. In verse number 8, says, but Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Now, here's something very interesting for you to consider. There's 2 ways to understand Zacchaeus' words, and it all comes back to how you translate the verbs. Most modern translations, as the one highlighted behind me, the NIV, will translate the verbs as if they are future tense. Like, now that Jesus is here, I will do this because you have transformed me. A greedy, dishonest tax collector invites Jesus. Jesus transforms him, and now he is going to be different moving forward. I will. But that's not how every translation treats these verbs. The King James, in fact, the King James translates the verbs in the present form, as if Zacchaeus was already saying, I give half of my goods to the poor. And if I ever do anything dishonest, I repay them fourfold, as if he's already presently living that way. And that changes things a bit because it doesn't align with the crowd's reputation of Zacchaeus, but it does align a little bit more with what his name represents. And I don't know the answer. We weren't there, but either way you look at it, here's the reality. Whether Zacchaeus was a thief who stole and whose life was transformed, or whether he was a righteous man already and invited Jesus into his house. Either way we look at it, here's the thing. Zacchaeus needed Jesus. Because whether we live unrighteous or whether we live very righteous, we're still in the same boat without Jesus. Whether we run from grace or whether we've tried to earn it, we all need what Zacchaeus needed, which is how Haley ended. We all need a Savior who sees us, who calls us, and who transforms us. And here's the thing. Sometimes those who think they have it all together are the slowest to admit they need Jesus. Plenty of rule keepers, like the Pharisees, refused to follow him. He watched the rich young ruler who said, I've kept all those commandments. He watched him walk away because he was unwilling to part with his wealth. And here's the thing. Being generous doesn't make us righteous. Being religious doesn't make us whole. Our righteousness is found only in Jesus. Which is why the end of this story has quite the twist. Verse 9, Jesus said to him, today, salvation has come to this house. Now let me pause right here for a moment. Both of these verses that we'll read together they're so interesting. We love, especially they come to seek and to save. But what we don't understand is how condemning this will be to those religious people who had gathered. I'm going to show you that in just a moment. But let's just take it piece by piece. Today, salvation has come to this house. The Jews all believe salvation comes from God, from Yahweh. The salvation of Yahweh. Do you know what Hebrew word that is? The salvation of Yahweh. It's actually Yeshua. And when you translate Yeshua into English, we get Jesus. Which means when Jesus said salvation, the salvation of God has come to this house, what he really was saying is Yeshua, the salvation of God, has come to this house. And these next couple words are so strange. We leave them out of the storybooks because we really don't know what to do with it. Yeshua has come to this house because, why has Yeshua come? Because this man is the son of Abraham. Huh? Who really talks? Does that matter? Yeshua comes to this house because this man is the son of Abraham, and the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which is lost. But see here again, we're about to see how Jesus' words are a striking condemnation to the religious leaders who said you should not go to this home. But to see it, we have to go to the Old Testament. So if you have a Bible, join me in Ezekiel chapter number 34. Ezekiel chapter number 34. In this chapter, Yahweh, through the prophet Ezekiel, is going to condemn the religious leaders of Israel. They had corrupted the priesthood. They used the offerings of the people to make themselves rich. They've turned the people against Yahweh himself and his ways. And so the prophet Ezekiel is going to call them out. The Lord's going to call them out through the prophet Ezekiel. We're just going to read a couple verses, but look at verses 1 and 2 of Ezekiel 34. The word of Yahweh came to me, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds. The shepherds would be the leaders, the religious rulers. Prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, this is what the sovereign Yahweh says. Woe to you, shepherds of Israel, who only take care of yourselves. Should not shepherds take care of the flock? I'm going to pause there. Verses 3 through 12, if you have a Bible, if you were just to look, verses 3 through 12, Yahweh calls out their failures to shepherd the flock. You use the wool of the flock to clothe yourselves. The flock has been hurt and you have not dressed their wounds. They have wandered and you have not gone over them. They have been gone after them. They have been attacked by wild animals. You have not rescued them. And then in verse 10, Yahweh actually describes the shepherds as having the sheep in their own mouths, as if the shepherds have become the enemies of the sheep. And so Yahweh says, I am against you, shepherds. I will remove you from being shepherds. And suddenly, like, oh, wait, didn't Jesus in the Gospels, Matthew 9, say, I have compassion on this multitude because they are like sheep without a shepherd? This is exactly what has been prophesied by Ezekiel. But now look at verse 11. For this is what the sovereign Yahweh says, I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. As a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he is with them, so will I look after my sheep. I will rescue them from all the places where they were scattered on a day of clouds and darkness. Oh, so do you understand? In these two verses, Yahweh says, I myself will come. I will search for my sheep. I will rescue my flock. He didn't say he'd send help. He said he would be the help, that Yahweh himself would come to be the shepherd who seeks and to save the flock of Israel, his flock. And then he's going to make out of two flocks one when the Gentiles come. So take that understanding and let's go back to what he said in Zacchaeus' house. Today, Yeshua, the salvation of Yahweh, has come to this house because Zacchaeus, this man, is he is a part of the flock. He is a son of Abraham, and the Son of Man has come as Yahweh himself has come to seek and to save the lost. Huh. Wait, what? What? Wait, you kidding me? You mean this little Sunday school parable about a wee little man isn't about the wee little man? It's about the almighty creator, God Yahweh, coming as the shepherd that he promised to be in Ezekiel 34. And he says, guess who just stepped into the house of this lost sheep of Israel? Yahweh himself. Yeshua, the salvation of Yahweh. This isn't about a wee little man. This is about a divine revelation of the Son of God. It's not a kid's fairy tale story. It is a masterclass of messianic fulfillment. We have seen divine interruptions show Jesus to be Yahweh in the flesh. As they crossed the Sea of Galilee and a storm hit, he shows himself to be Yahweh in the flesh of Psalm 89, the one who stills the wind and the waves. As the woman with the issue of blood reaches out and touches just the hem of his garment, he shows himself to be Yahweh in the flesh, the very Son who has healing in his wings. And now, as this divine interruption, as he is just passing through, he walks into the house of one of the lost sheep of Israel to say, let me show you, I am Yahweh in the flesh. I am the great shepherd of Ezekiel 34, who has come to seek and to save the lost. What a cool book. What a cool God. And he's your shepherd too. So what do you take away? This week, treat divine interruptions as divine opportunities. Each morning when you wake up, may I encourage you to do this. Pray this prayer. Spirit, help me see today's interruptions as invitations to know you in a greater way and to show you to those who don't know you yet. Allow interruptions to be opportunities for you and for others. Secondly, live on mission, not for position. The religious leaders, those who were supposed to be the shepherds, failed. The priesthood was not about performing religious activities. It was about bringing atonement, standing between God and man, and yet they were taking advantage of their position. Don't live for position, church. Live on mission. And our mission is not to come to church. Our mission is not to read the Bible. Our mission is to love God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the church will help you do that, and the scriptures will help you do that. But we are called to be in relationship, not isolating ourselves to do things on our own, but in a community. Live on mission. Find one person this week in your circle, at home, at school, or at work, and do something for them quietly, but tell them why. Jesus wants you to know how much he loves you, and he asked me to send that message. Don't make it about you, make it about him. But don't just do something good and walk away. Do something good and tell them why. This is from the King. Last, just the understanding that transformation requires an invitation. Zacchaeus didn't believe from a distance, just like we have seen the last couple weeks. He moved, he climbed a tree, he welcomed Jesus into his home. Many gathered. Zacchaeus was the one who's invited. This week, may I encourage you, take 10 minutes. Take 10 minutes where this phone gets turned off. The noise is shut out. And can I encourage you? Drop the fig leaves we all hold up. You know, the fig leaves that we brought in with us this morning so nobody knows who we really are? Just drop them. And just sit before Jesus and say, Jesus, I welcome you into my home, into my life, into my plans, into my fears. Show me what you want to change. I invite you in. And then listen. And then follow. Imagine the kind of impact in a community a group of people like this could make if we left here to say, I won't mind being interrupted this week because it'll give me a chance to show Jesus. I won't live for myself this week. I'm going to live on mission, trying to bring Jesus to others. And I am going to regularly sit and allow Jesus to transform me and then go live that out so that his transformation can be seen by others. We could make a difference, not because we are anything, but because he is everything and he is in our midst. And encourage you, live on mission this week invite him in and just drop the fig leaves. Would you pray with me?